Cool, so let's kick off. Hello, everybody. My name is Rafael. I'm a visual effects animator currently working at Method Studios. And today I'm working as a judge to critique this animation that was an entry for the Rookies Animation Contest. And just to get a brief overview of the contest, it was artists had about a month to submit an animation to the theme of crazy in quarantine, which was a really fun theme given the context of people being stuck in quarantine this year due to COVID-19 around the world. So yeah, it was super open-ended brief. People said to submit an animation, 1 or 2 characters, just fitting with the theme. And today we have Durno here, who came in second place in the animation contest. So we're going to just go through, do a few critiques, and we'll casually be chatting throughout. So that's the intro for YouTube, so in case people are interested in what the contest is about.
Oh, nice.
Anyways, let's get cracking. So I'm going to play the animation a few times so people can get an idea of what we're looking at, and then we'll get into a bit of a review.
Okay.
So it's cool work, man. It's really cool work.
Thank you.
Like any good critique session, we always start with the pros, to build up your confidence. So let's start with some pros.
Okay.
So the reason I really like this entry was just in general, the energy of the shot. So the energy is super nice. It's a fight sequence, so you want all the hits and all the impacts to be super strong, super punchy. And that's one thing you for sure nailed. Like the intensity and the energy through the shot is super nice.
Oh, brilliant! That's what I was aiming for the entire time. I was constantly asking friends like, "Oh, does this look right?" And they're like, "Oh no, I feel like it. It's not quite strong enough."
Fantastic.
So yeah, I had a lot of feedback for this.
Perfect. So for me, it's mostly just the timing of the action. From impact to impact to impact. The camera is intense as well, and it helps in this sense. And I just find like a lot of student work. It's an area that everybody's always trying to improve in. It's just like the general timing of your motion,
Yeah.
And student work for some reason always tends to make motion quite floaty. Like I'm super guilty of that when I was a student. I've seen other work where it's hard to just get that punchy timing to any sort of movement, like from a walk and a run to an action like this. So to get the timing nicely in the early in your animation career, it's nice. So it's like the first thing I like the most about the shot, just the punchiness of the action. If it was floaty, you feel like you'd miss out a lot of the energy. So it's working well.
Oh, thank you. I was worried it was too much movement.
So it is a little too much movement with the camera.
Yeah.
And it's part of the notes that I've taken down here. I'm gonna kind of go through them in order, just so
Oh yeah, okay.
Get mine going, but we're definitely going to address it at least what we're trying to achieve with the camera. So.
Okay.
Also, another thing I really like is the pan flipping in the beginning. It's like a small detail, but it's super nice.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've referenced a lot of this, like just me thinking like, how would I do this? And when I'm cooking, I'm always flipping the pan around. So I was like, I got that down. That's the main thing. I don't have much references of me punching people, but flipping pans is something I definitely have a reference of. Yeah.
That's perfect, because it's exactly the reason why I like it. The reason I like it is because an animation like this, like an actually sequence, you can do whatever you want, right? Like in terms of the choreography, you can do as you please. It's so open-ended. So like the pen flip it's your choice, right? It's like if I was to animate this, I might have not added a pen flip. So for me, those little details are really like what showcases the artist and like what you wanted or what your vision was, and it's nice. It looks cool, and it's like a fun little detail, and it's what makes it a little more unique to your style. It's cool.
Yeah, thank you. I had so many ideas. I was gonna use the colander on her head as a weapon to kind of get back, and I was like, no, the time frame. There's not enough time. I just use it as a big headbutt.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, it's like a fun concept already, like kitchen warfare. So like, I'm sure you can pick up a whole bunch of ideas. If you get back into the shot at any point, you can totally do some other crazy stuff with it. But Yeah, and also I'll commend you for just like going the extra mile on like a pretty challenging shot, right? Because, excuse me, if I was doing this as a student, I feel like I would have totally approached doing a fight sequence. It's really fun. It's like, as an animator, people always want to do fun action stuff. But the choreography, the camera, it's like, it's pretty intense and it's not easy to pull off. So I think, you know, being willing to go into the challenge of doing a crazy camera and some crazy action, it's fun. And it's like, it's the best way to learn, because you have to push some of those boundaries to learn how to maneuver a camera through a scene, how to stage like an action sequence like this. Nice effort on going, you know, away from like a static camera, just showcasing the action.
Oh yeah. Yeah, thank you. It's been like a long journey, like animation wise. I learned quite early on that the camera can add like 90% of the pop to something. So like my friends, when I did the smack of the first frying pan hit,
yep,
they were like, it didn't really pop. They were like, yeah, it kind of looks like it just brushed off her face. And then I added the camera movement where it shakes as it hits her, and then they were like, oh damn, she got hit really hard. Like, how is she not dead?
It's awesome. Yeah, for sure. It's like, yeah, so I love it. So yeah, it's like, it's not super common to see like intense camera work in more junior animation, you know, like, because it makes sense, right? Your goal is to learn animation, so you're showcasing the character moving, and usually the camera can be a little more static.
Yeah.
But I agree, adding a little camera movement, even subtle stuff, can really add life to a shot. Like, in my opinion, I always love to add a bit of camera movement. Think of the cameraman holding a camera, and it
Yeah,
just,
that's what I was thinking of.
it makes it feel so much more realistic. So,
Mm.
anyways, so really nice work. The base is working super nicely, and we'll crack on to some critiques and some ideas on how we can, you know, improve it and make it stronger and make it a really sick shot for your showreel. You know, it's the goal.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
So let's put the tea away and get working. So what I like to do is just the first few times I watch it, just take down some notes on what are like the first things that are starting to catch my attention, in terms of like, that's a bit of an issue that we could address.
Okay.
In this case, I think the first thing that was really catching my attention is just the hands. So the hands of both characters, a few times are quite static in their posing. You know, throughout the section, the character feels like he's like in a default open hand pose. And you always want to avoid this. You know, you want to make sure you're doing fun stuff and cool poses with your hands. And this is like prevalent across the section as he's about to grab her. You know, he doesn't have much reaction in his fingers, and it's something you want to avoid in general.
Okay.
So over here, he just got hit pretty hard. The open hands are cool, but maybe as he's gearing to get back into battle, you know, I think closing up the hands and going for fists will probably work a lot better.
Oh yeah, yeah. As soon as you started drawing the fist, I was like, that's much better.
I feel like the goal is just to make sure everything's working and it feels organic and realistic. And at any point that I start to see, you know, default sort of hand poses flying around, it just feels like a missed opportunity to do something fun with the posing.
Yeah.
So I think just some fist poses. I'll take down a note here.
Okay, thanks.
But the note is just true throughout. You know, as he's preparing to grab the girl, over here he's going to do like a bit of a choke towards the table. This is an opportunity to go from your closed fist to open fist as he grabs her. You know, you get the opportunity to go from close to, all right, let's attack this girl. So then I think you should definitely have, you know, a tighter close post here as he's beginning to initiate his attack. And then as he grabs her, like maybe you'll be more clear on this hand. Really, really aggressive, really wide open hands. Gets his fingers around her, and then again closes as they get towards the last part of this section here. But Yeah, so the hand poses in general, we just want to focus on them throughout. It's like, it's so important, especially for this shot, because it's a fight sequence and most of the action is framed, you know, like mid framing where we see the upper body. So it's the upper body and the hands are super important.
Yeah.
The same is true here. Potentially this hand over here. I think we can just get a little more exciting hand shape. So you also want to sometimes avoid having all the fingers looking quite symmetrical. Not always true, because you can totally do an open hand pose like this since he's getting hit. But it's always fun just to try maybe a few open fingers and then a couple kind of curled beneath. And maybe the ones that are curled beneath will open next. You know, it gives you a little more room to add motion to those hands.
Okay.
They're just such an important part of the animation. The goal is to really, yeah, include them in the motion and make sure that they feel like they're part of the fight sequence we have going on here.
Yeah.
If not, they can start to feel disconnected. This arm here, it gives you the impression that, you know, if I was to shoot reference on myself about to punch somebody, it'd be very unlikely that I'd be holding my arm behind me completely open. You know, I think it's more likely that he might have returned his hand towards his body here to you know, potentially block another incoming attack, or maybe, you know, he'd have more of a pose like this coming from this open hand here. He's in the middle of a battle. I think he'd be a little more, you know, reactionary to what's taking place rather than having an arm kind of floating to the back.
Okay. Yeah.
So essentially, it's like an overarching idea of what I would want to do with the hands, and it's just making sure that throughout the motion, as much as you're hitting your key beats and your key like actions of the characters, the hands are also feeling like, you know, driven by the character and driven by his thoughts. In the spy sequence is important. I think having a few moments where they're trying to just defend themselves can be really cool as well.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay.
They can use their hands as a more like a mechanism to, you know, push away from someone, to block their face, to dodge a punch, and it will start to add you know, a more organic fight feeling to the motion. Because if I'm watching, you know, this section here, it's easy with the hand being quite large to really focus on the hand just floating off to the back, whereas I want to be focusing on this middle section where all the action's taking place.
Yeah.
The hands also can feel a little bit a little bit floaty in their movement through some of these sections, you know, like the hand reaching towards the space over here, it kind of stays in that pose and just drifts towards his mouth. And I think adding a little more movement in the hands, what you'd find is that if you shot reference, you'd almost never have a hand that slowly drifts towards an area, you know. In a fight sequence like this, you're going to be a lot more tense and a lot more like aware of what your body is doing. So I think in this case, again, he might have punched and then the hand's coming back and he's maybe going into some sort of a, you know, defensive stance. Maybe he rotates his hand towards the girl and he's getting himself ready to block an incoming attack.
All right. Okay.
And maybe this hand he was going to get used to block. We could do a pose like this with it. So the idea is just to make sure that he's really in control of his hands throughout the fight sequence. I'll kind of just do a pass to it where I look at the hands and I make sure that you know, it's like the mind of the character controlling the motion. You never want it to be kind of drifting away on its own, even if it's not part of the action taking place. You want to make sure that he's engaged, because it's like a life or death fight sequence taking place here, you know. Not sure what I'm fighting about, but Jesus Christ. On the same topic of hands, I think a few areas where we can address some of the context, like this punch here, it feels punchy, but if you were to pause in it, I think making sure that the fist is really contacting against the chin, it's the sort of thing that can make the shot so much stronger, you know?
Okay. Yeah, I was having a lot of issue trying to make that one pop. So thank you for kind of opening my eyes a bit with that.
Of course, no worries. And it's just a, a shot like this. It really like lives and dies on all the context taking place. So my mind is super attuned to this right now because I'm doing a personal shot myself. It's got two characters kind of fighting with each other. So and I find any time that you can have like a hand making contact and pushing a face away, and then the punch goes and the head comes back. Any moment that you can include contact between body and limbs, it just makes the two characters feel so much more realistic and like they have mass to their bodies and they feel organic. So in this case, you always want to make sure that if I was to like pause this frame, like this punch is really on the bottom of that chin, driving it through, and that hand could be here. We get a little more clarity in the posing because right now we're kind of losing her arm there. So I think the arm could have driven through there and this guy's chin would have been flying off somewhere else, really pushing his head backwards. It's a something that can also add a whole lot of snap to the character.
Yeah, okay.
But so a general pass through all the context and all the points that they interact with each other, and you want to make sure they all feel really strong, really punchy, and they're always contacting really nicely. Because just like the general timing and the general base of the motion, it's all working well. It just needs the little extra polish to make sure that the goal is to aim for quality that you might be able to see like in a feature film. We're trying to achieve movie.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're always learning or always improving, but that's the goal. And
well, thank you.
Of course, man, the base is working super well. The timing of the camera, the action, it feels good. It's more like on closer inspection. Once I put like my animator eye on and I start to like look at some details, I'm like, okay, cool, we can improve this, we can improve that. But for example, you're not too far off, right? It's just a matter of getting this hand right underneath the chin and making this context feel super like strong, against surfaces.
Yeah.
For an action shot like this, is super important. I think you might find that to be true just throughout the shot. For example, an issue like this, like the character's fingers going through the character, we want to avoid.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. I didn't see that. I was like, oh yes, I've done it. I spent so long trying to make it not clip. I didn't. That's one that slipped through the cracks, I guess.
No worries, and it's like it happens all the time. Even at a professional level, it happens all the time. You get so focused on certain areas that you're polishing, you forget that a certain foot or a hand was going through an object. So perfectly normal. But this is a perfect opportunity to this hand here. I think if she was defending against somebody coming towards her, she'd be trying to push away, which would mean she could place her hand, say, on the shoulder. And I feel like, so say that was her hand like this. That gives you an opportunity to then extend her hand and have his body, recoil to that push. And adding all these little context as they're interacting with each other, it's what makes a fight sequence feel so believable. So instead of having a hand, even I think it would be easy to get away with her hand being obscured, somewhere in front of him. But I wouldn't shy away from finding as many contexts as possible. She could also be if we go another frame forward. She could also, maybe have her hand driving underneath his face because maybe she's trying to push him away from getting too close. So maybe that's her hand, and this guy's leaning there, and he's getting his head pushed away. And it's like a defense mechanism, push the head away so that the rest of the body will follow. But any moment that you can find where you can include those fun contexts, they make a fight sequence feel so much more believable. So, so yeah, I think a general pass through the hand poses, making sure they're always aggressive, make sure they're always well controlled, considering they're in a fight is important. And then finding any area that you can add with little context as they're fighting can be really nice.
All right. Okay.
And a tip just on context like that, I always do them at the very end of my shot. So as I'm blocking my animation, I will block in all those poses. Then I will start to, I will start to progress with the motion and start to clean it up. And throughout my sequence, I might have hands slightly going through faces, for example, or slightly going through shoulders. So I animate both characters. For example, one would push a head and the head would move. As I start editing, maybe that contact doesn't feel as clean anymore, but it's perfectly fine as long as I can feel like that the hand is pushing the head away. And then once I'm happy with all the motion and it all feels like it's interacting nicely, I do a final pass where I get in there and I really make sure all the contacts are like, you know, skin to skin, like really perfect. But it's not something you want to do straight away because it's so easy to get stuck in there and really pose like a hand around the face, for example, and then maybe you tweak a character's chest and then suddenly the head is, you know, a little bit different. So you're gonna have to repose that entire hand across the face, and just to save yourself some work time.
Yeah, that's something I kept doing. I kept making the poses first. I was like, I want to make sure that I know what I'm doing, and then I'd like get some feedback, be like, oh yeah, like he needs to be knocked back further from the headbutt, and I was like, oh damn it, now I have to reposition everything. So I definitely need to practice on blocking a lot more.
It's but it's so easy to do. I do the same thing. So like I will kind of do a rough posing of what I imagine, but then I'll kind of leave it for a while until I'm really happy with all the areas that it could move, that could influence the position of the hand. So it's just an idea to kind of save you a bit of time, you know. But it's so easy to like get a really cool pose in the head. Maybe you make a tweak and then you really want to get that cool pose back in the head. It's super easy, but it's just like the mindset that you're going to get back to it and you're going to clean all those contacts up at the end.
Okay.
It's so fresh in my mind. I'm doing a shot very similar to yours, like two characters fighting, and it's really fun to do those contacts, but I have to remind myself, like, wait until the end. That's when we're going to get in there and really make sure all of them are feeling super organic.
Okay.
I think another area I was looking at that kind of caught my attention a little bit. So I'm not sure how flexible these guys are in terms of their facial animation, but it's an area that could use a bit of improvement, mostly in terms of like eye directions. There are a few sections where they kind of don't seem to quite be looking at each other. Say throughout this section, perhaps it looks a little bit like she's looking up at the roof. A section like this, she really should. It would be awesome to have this angry face here, and really have those pupils right underneath the eye, like really focus on each other. I think you'll find that even during a fight sequence is quite intense, you're kind of orienting your face and your eyes to your opponent to make sure that you're always, you know, engaged and looking at what you're about to do next against them. So it'll be subtle, but just making sure that the eyes are always in the right sort of like direction and they're never doing anything too odd is important.
All right.
The same is true here, right? She's looking off into this direction, and it really gives you the sense that she's no longer engaged with the action taking place. Where it's really likely if somebody's falling in front of you that she would really have her pupils right there in the center, and she would still be very much engaged with the battle taking place. So it's pretty subtle and it doesn't detract too much from the action taking place. But when you start to look at those little details, I think it's important to make sure, like, you know, in a sense, you're always kind of oriented towards your opponent. I think even if you're kind of taking something of a punch and you get underneath it, you're still kind of looking towards your opponent or where the punch is coming from. So just the general orientation of the faces towards each other, I think it's important.
Okay.
So yeah, the facial animation could add a little bit. I don't know if you can do something with the mouse as well, but a few angry poses. I think keeping it pretty subtle could be fun. You don't do too much, but you know, this girl could really have her mouth open and you might see the size of her teeth and it might make her look so much angrier. It's not the best drawing of a mouth I've ever seen, but I'm sure you get the idea.
Yeah.
Or maybe, you know, just a mouth open at times could give the impression of like panting or heavy breathing throughout a fight sequence. Like, see, that's looking a lot cooler for me. This one works really well, right? She's got eyes locked on target and she's screaming, so she's about to do some heavy damage. And I think that's kind of what you want to achieve throughout the animation.
Okay.
Whereas this guy over here, he looks so much less, so much more disinterested. You know, we don't see his eyes
Yeah.
clearly, so and they look a little bit closed. Maybe they should be a bit more open because although he got punched, you know, I feel like you'd be really in the midst of battle. Perhaps a bit more open like that, and the mouth doesn't always have to be open and screaming, but I think just clenched teeth can just add so much to a character, make it look like he's gritting his teeth because he's in the middle of a big fight here.
Yeah. Okay.
This is so successful and posing on the same frame on the other character. He just feels so disinterested, but the goal is to make sure that they're really engaged in this battle.
Yeah.
Over here you have her. I think she might close her eyes through there. I can't quite tell, but even closing the eyes before doing a big punch is super cool. Like really feels like she's like putting power into a punch, and that's always really fun.
Thank you. Thinking back on it, I was like, oh yeah, it'd be cool if she's gritting her teeth and like really straining her face. But that's one thing I haven't quite mastered yet is facial animation.
Yeah, and
Like,
it's tricky. It takes a long time to be
mm,
good at facial animation. I
yeah,
haven't done too much throughout my career, but it's not easy. So I don't think you need too many poses. You know, they're fighting and they're not going to be doing a lot of their faces. But I think just like having a set of angry poses, like a scream, a teeth clenched, and I don't know, maybe a surprise for when they get a big punch against their faces. I think all of that will just add a lot more to the shot.
yeah, okay,
In terms of feeling the intensity. I think it definitely comes a little secondary to the fact that getting the body all working perfectly is the principal thing we're aiming for. But
yeah,
I would focus on the bodies, making them look amazing, and then after that we can get into some faces, and I think it'll make the shot a little bit stronger.
mm.
And then something else I was going to mention. Let's look at the fight sequence again. I'm just going to play it through. So something that's important to keep in mind. So I'm not sure how much you've animated the feet throughout the sequence.
I made sure that they were like to the best of my ability, like supporting themselves, just in case I wanted to move the camera later on.
Exactly, that's exactly the idea you want to go for. So I'm happy you said that, and that's the right idea. But at times I can kind of feel how static their feet are on the floor. Say the girl in the beginning, for example, she's got her feet planted and she's not doing too much. I think it'd be fun if you were to see some footage of people fighting. They're usually doing a lot of movement.
What, like dancing around on their feet?
Sort of like getting on the balls of their feet, ready to like lean one way, lean another way. Even for a battle like this, two people that are not professional fighters, but I think they might be anticipating an attack. I think that they will feel lighter on their feet, and perhaps take a few more steps than say one step and do an attack, one step and stay in one pose. I think it's for a shot like this, it's easy to do a basic pass on the feet, and then because we don't see them, we don't put more effort into them. Say this character here is pressing against it quite violently, but his hips are really locked in space. Same with her hips. And in a fight sequence like this, the hips are so important, right? Because that's the area that's going to drive a lot of the emotion. Just to give you an example, so I'm just going to draw a little something over here. Like this. So I'm currently animating a shot where I have two characters fighting, and the angle is like this, like quite front on. So I've got a character on the ground, and then another character that's coming over the top, fighting with them, and they're kind of rolling on the ground, jiu-jitsu style.
Ooh.
So you really see like the top of their bodies as they've crashed into the camera. So both of them were fighting, and they've crashed into camera like this. And this character in the bottom is doing a lot of movement from side to side as he's like on the floor, but trying to dodge the punches raining down on him. And all the movement that I see on the torso that you see on my shots, it's all driven by the feet and the hips, which you don't see in the shots. So I put a lot of effort into animating the hips and the feet, even though we hardly see them, because for the character to rotate one way while he's got his back on the floor, he really has to drive his hips in a direction first so he can counter rotate one way, counter rotate the other way.
Yeah.
And that principle is just important for any sequence really, but for an action sequence, so much movement is driven from the hips and the feet, you know, like I feel like anytime you're doing a punch with a character, you're going down with your hips and then leaning through your body to build power. And all of that requires some movement on the feet and some repositioning of the hips to drive power through. So I think doing a pass where you really focus on the hips, you know, study a bit of reference and find out what the hips should be doing. Moments like this, you know, the character in the yellow could potentially be a bit lower and then drive himself upwards for momentum. Moments like this, we don't see the hips, but you will feel it so much in the motion if you really focus on it.
Okay.
Because it can be noticeable in certain areas like this. This girl, to try and get away, her torso is kind of pinned, which means that right now she would probably be bringing this leg down and maybe shifting her butt off to this side to build some space between herself and the other character. And maybe this character would be driving his hips forward to pin her in place and to build himself over her even more to really push down upon her. So all that movement of the hips on the characters is so important. And I'm not saying you neglect it. I'm saying it's easy to neglect when your focus is all like on the upper body and all the action that we see on the camera is on the upper sections of their bodies. But just as a general idea, make sure to build the feet and the hips first, and all the motion is going to be so much cleaner when you go to animation.
Okay.
I would never polish the feet in this case, but I would make sure they're doing all the right movements. I would never, for example, get in there and make sure they're doing like beautiful foot rolls. It's really not important. But I would make sure they're always doing slight weight shifts, slight movement shifts. I would block in all of those because they will drive where the hips are moving from side to side, and it will drive all the action on the top, and it'll feel so much better, so much more just organic in their movements, and it's really noticeable. It's maybe the average person wouldn't be able to tell, but once you're engaged in your animation now, you feel how all of it is driven from the bottom up, and it can really add a lot to the animation.
Okay.
Granted, it's all working really nicely. I just feel like there's some areas where you can feel the hips are not quite doing as they should.
Yeah, I was feeling like it was lacking some stuff. But me and my friends, we're not really pro animators yet, so we don't have an animation eye, as to speak. But
For sure,
this is really helping out. So thank you. I'm looking forward to using this advice in other projects and stuff.
Amazing. I'm super glad to hear that. It takes a long time, of course.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to give you this advice when I was a student myself. You know, I was also going through the process of learning, and you're only as good as your current level and your current colleagues and what you learn. So these are all ideas I've learned throughout my time. I've learned how important it is to animate certain aspects that are outside of the framing, but are going to have a huge influence in the believability of your shot. It's this idea.
Yeah.
And for this fight sequence, you know, there are times when we're super close in their torsos, we don't see their feet at all, but like getting some feet movement even in here and making sure that it builds off a realistic base, it's what makes it get to the next level. The general idea. One other thing I'd love to get in there and kind of tweak, if I could. There are a few moments where we have the characters quite stacked on top of each other. Say, for example, this frame here, you know?
Oh, what way he's blocking her from the camera's point of view.
Yeah, if I was on paper just drawing a couple of characters fighting, I would almost never draw one character directly on top of the other and say, you know, this is a fight sequence. If I'm trying to copy what you got here. It's just not what you're going for. You know, the idea with staging is that you're always making things quite clear. So granted, the camera is moving a lot, and this is not present throughout the shots. But almost at any point, you want to be able to pause the action and be like, you could show it to your parents and they'll be like, oh yeah, of course these two characters are fighting. So in this case, it would be as simple as making sure the girl is potentially just leaning forward a bit more to reach an item, and just that lean forward would get her from away from him. So maybe she's got her hips partially obscured, but I will put some effort into making sure that they're not stacked, just for visual clarity.
Okay.
The same is present in some other areas. But this one makes sense, of course, because the character's on top of her, and even now, you've got quite good staging between the two characters, because we can quite clearly see what the hell's going on. But say this moment here, if I was to pause the camera here, I really have no idea what the hell's going on.
Oh yeah. Okay.
This character should definitely be off to the side over here and initiating his fall. You're just leaving yourself so much empty space over here and directly stacking one character on top of the other. And you're just doing the animation at the service. You know, we want to see the girl in her like dominant stance at the end as she then did the hit. And this character has a lot of room to fall and do like a really nice arc. You know, maybe he falls this way, and as he's falling, his head really drags behind, and we got one hand that really drags behind. And all of that, you know, just makes the animation feel quite nice.
Yeah.
But the main concept we're trying to achieve is just a little more visual clarity throughout the characters, because most of the other parts of the motion are working really cool. It's a difficult camera, and even for a moving camera, you want to make sure you're always placing your characters correctly to not stack them one on top of the other.
Yeah.
So really, only a couple of sections, but it's a sort of thing that will build a bit of clarity. And in this case, you have all the space necessary to push the character. You know, I think even if he kind of got punched, where his momentum would lead him across the screen this way, he could, you know, just like lean this way potentially, but then very easily fall in this direction. And yeah, it'll make the it's just about building clarity to the motion. You want to watch it and understand exactly what's going on at all times, and it would make things just more engaging. You know, we want to see the girl at the end as she stands over the body. And then a few smaller notes, but just in terms of adding a little something extra when you're really trying to get in there and polish the animation. If you have the ability to control, say, the colander or the glasses, it can be really nice to animate them for some secondary movement. You know, there's so much impact happening, and it'll be cool if we could read some of the impact in just the colander being a little offset to this girl's head. So maybe, you know, as she's falling here, the colander is more angled this way over her head.
Yeah.
And as it falls, you know, it kind of angles this way, and it's a bit more like angled in this direction. I think adding a little secondary movements, even if it's not super realistic, like realistically, maybe it would just fly off, right? But
yeah.
Animation, we can do whatever we want. So it's just adding the secondary movement will make it so much nicer as well. Same with the glasses. It'll be so cool if after a few punches, you know, this guy's glasses will potentially, you know, all the way up here, and then they kind of fall back into place.
Yeah, I looked into the glasses. The glasses don't, or I couldn't find a way to move them. But the colander I made myself, so I could have moved that. So next time I make my own props, and I will make sure to add secondary movement, because and I'm sure it adds a lot of realism to it. Yeah,
for sure, and it's just fun, right? It's what makes it feel realistic, because it almost feels like it's simulated or something, you know. So
yeah,
in a feature film, we do a character with like fur, and we get that simulated by another department, and it's so nice to see your animation plus like some fur or like a character's tail all simulated. It just adds that extra like level of detail to the character. So
yeah,
in this case, just that colander, just I would honestly just make it overlap whatever the head is doing. The head goes this way, the colander, you know, drags behind and overlaps. I'll do that throughout, and it's a little touch that just makes it feel so much nicer. The glasses would be fun to animate if you have the opportunity to like, rip that geometry, parent it to a locator, for example, and then animate that. It's like super.
Oh yeah, or like he loses the glasses halfway through the fight, and then from then on he can't really see what he's doing.
Exactly, you can use it as a prop for the story, right? Maybe he loses the glasses at some point, and then that's the reason the tides turn and the girl begins to dominate the fight. Stuff like that can be really fun. Or even he doesn't lose the glasses, and if they were just like falling off his face, you can get some comical timing with the glasses, being here potentially and falling down a little bit after him.
Oh yeah, that'd be good.
It's exactly like the pen flip at the beginning. It's like a fun little detail. It just adds a little bit of character. So you decide like, hey, this will be funny, and you just go ahead and do it. So
yeah,
you have an opportunity to animate a secondary prop like that. It can be nice. It's not distracting at all. It's just a little extra animation to make it a little more fun.
Yeah.
And then let's talk a little bit about the camera.
Okay.
So the camera is working really well. Like it's telling all the punches, and like you said, it's adding a lot of punchiness to the animation. Like that for sure, it's working. My suggestion for the camera is just the way to think about doing camera work. And the way that I approach it, I'm no expert in camera, but it's often the case that we do camera work in working in films. And it's really just putting yourself into the shoes of the cameraman and trying to imagine, what the cameraman would be doing. And despite the fact that what you have works, maybe it's not super realistic at times. And what I mean is that you have the camera often directly responding and reacting to the punches. And if you imagine yourself with a camera filming a fight sequence and somebody punched someone, it's highly unlikely that I would then go ahead and recoil to the punch, unless they were like superheroes and they had like shockwaves coming out of their hands. So what you tend to do with camera is really put yourself into the shoes of the cameraman and imagine you were following this battle. And I think you would find it's less of a direct correlation to a punch and more like, oh shit, I gotta pull back because the characters are getting too close to the camera, or I gotta walk forward because I gotta get back in on the action. You combine these more natural movements with a bit of shape because of the intensity of the action, like in a cameraman holding onto the camera, perhaps on his shoulder or by his hands, and you start to get a little more of a realistic feeling. Because what you have right now, it works well, but in a feature film setting, it might not be realistic enough to pass on a film, for example. And often what we try to achieve is realism.
Yeah. Okay. I feel like the first two, like the first two movements where things are getting hit with the frying pan, the camera it doesn't move too much there. It gives just enough movement to be like, oh wow, that was a big smack. I then tried to like overcompensate with the last ones where she's punching them. I was like, the power of the punch isn't really there, so I tried to move the camera to try and like show that it was still a strong punch. I need to get better at making the punches, and then the camera movement would follow.
For sure. I think in any case, it's amazing practice, right? Like it was good practice to get in there and play with a camera, because a lot of people maybe shy away from it, and it's not the most entertaining thing to do. But I think it's an important skill to learn, because
well, I mean, animation is animation, right? You gotta like it's still a part of the scene, so
exactly. And in this case, for sure, like it adds so much. The concept I'm trying to suggest is doing exactly the same thing, but from a slightly more like realistic perspective. And it's tricky, but it's just putting yourself into the shoes of the cameraman. And perhaps you can get two friends to just come to fight each other or scuffle, and you have a camera and you would follow. And
that's actually a really good idea.
I would do that, and then I would study what sort of motion the camera is doing. And you can exaggerate your motion as well, but I think you find it's less of a reaction to like direct punches simultaneously, and more of a, oh, I'm following the action. Oh, there's a punch going. Oh, I gotta follow. And it's what would make the character and the shots feel a little more the goal is realism, and it's all going with this battle,
Mm.
and it will add a little more believability.
Okay.
So yeah, it's just thinking about the camera, because the camera is always a storytelling tool as well. So the way that we use the camera is super important, especially when you're gonna do so much with it. I think it's really fun because I love pushing the boundaries with a camera and trying to get really like dynamic angles and crazy framing. I think it can add a lot to animation, but still grounding it in some sense of believability and realism. It's important.
Yeah.
And also the camera sort of goes static at the end, say throughout the last like 30 or so frames. And considering how much movement we had, the completely static camera at the end can be a little bit jarring. So
Oh, it's a bit jarring. Would you suggest that I slowly pan down or just made some sort of movement?
again, I would suggest think of the cameraman. I think the cameraman would kind of tilt down to look at the character going towards the ground, and probably stay on her and kind of just like there'll be a little floatiness to the camera, because the reason the camera moves a little bit like this is somebody's holding it, and
Yeah.
we don't stand perfectly still. We wait, shift, we move our shoulders a little bit. So I think the camera would come down, look at her, and just have a little subtle movement to it because somebody's holding the camera.
Yeah. Okay.
But you don't want to have a completely static camera because it's not an easy thing to achieve in real life, especially like directly after all this action. Like if you were to imagine this camera, I don't think it's on a tripod because somebody's been moving around with it the whole time. So for it to suddenly go completely static, like it's on a tripod, it's not quite working correctly. So
Okay.
a little more, keep it alive throughout the end, and again, it just ties the whole shot together. So. But yeah, that's more or less all like the major notes that I have on my side. So
Okay. Thank you for doing this. I've made a bunch of notes while you're doing this, so I'll try and bring them into my next piece of work.
yeah, exactly. Like it's an exercise in learning. So maybe you don't want to readdress the notes in this shot because it's a shot that you did just for this contest. But I hope I gave you some ideas on something you can keep in mind when doing a shot next time. How to approach a camera, how to think about the character's limbs while they're off the camera to add believability. All these ideas that can hopefully help you improve as an animator.
Yeah, they definitely will. I've learned more than I was expecting to learn from this. Like,
Fantastic.
I've learned more than the first couple of months of the course so far.
I'll take it as a compliment.
It's a very big compliment.
In any case, I'll do a little outro, and I guess we'll wrap up the review.
Okay.
Yeah. So overall, really nice animation. It's just once you focus in on the animation details, which is super important to us as animators, you get in there, you tweak a few areas, and like you can take an animation from nice to like for sure you want to use it in a show reel because it's a really cool shot. But really nice work. Congratulations on second place. Thank you to anybody watching on YouTube. I don't know if anybody will watch this and tune this far, but thank you for supporting the rookies. And cool. Thank you for joining. Now, let me go ahead and start recording.